A flat line lifts off the bottom of the monitor. Slowly. Almost invisible at first. One pulse returns through the static. Then another. Triton's signal is active again. An operator reopens the archive's timing window. The receiver channel had only been live for a few seconds. But the first returning packet carries an earlier timestamp than the restart itself. Not delayed. Earlier. Nobody in the room reacts immediately after that. Because at Triton, distance, delay is normal. Wrong order is not. The room stays quiet while the system rebuilds the signal trace across the screen. Thin pulses return through the static, one after another. Triton's signal returns after silence. One of the operators reopens the archive transmission window and scrolls back through the timing data. The receiver channel had only been active again for a few seconds. But the timestamp attached to the returning signal appears earlier than the restart itself. The timestamp appears before the restart itself. The line is already rising beside the wrong timestamp. Out beyond Neptune, every transmission from Triton already arrives delayed by distance. Nobody expects real-time communication that far away. The entire system depends on delayed evidence. Signals arrive long after events happen. Everyone working the monitor understands that. But the sequence no longer follows the restart. If the silence ended when the receiver reopened, the returning signal should begin afterward. Instead, the system logs show activity beginning before anyone was listening again. The signal was not gone. For a moment, the room becomes procedural again. Operators check synchronization drift, receiver alignment, archive overlap. The signal continues climbing steadily through the monitor while the verification routines run underneath it. No sudden spikes, no corruption. Just a normal-looking transmission attached to an impossible restart time. The silence window changes shape immediately. What looked empty now looks unobserved. And if the signal was already active during the blackout period, then the first assumption collapses with it. Humans are not watching Triton directly. They are trusting evidence that arrives too late to prove when anything actually began. Packets begin arriving before the verification process finishes. Short bursts at first. 3 telemetry lines stacked together, then silence again. A few seconds later, another cluster appears higher on the monitor. Triton's signal arrives in broken bursts. One operator freezes the playback and starts matching the labels against the receiver timeline. Several packets reference transmission activity that had supposedly already completed during the earlier silence window. One of them points backward into an activity period the system already marked closed. The packet references activity from a transmission window the archive already marked complete. Telemetry packets start stacking out of sequence. For a while, the room settles into routine work again. Packet sorting, delay compensation, archive comparisons. The monitor continues filling with clean data while the software tries rebuilding a stable timeline underneath it. No visible corruption appears inside the packets themselves. Only the sequence changes. Across Neptune distance, timing is operational. Minutes matter. Hours matter. Controllers can tolerate delay because delay still preserves order. A signal can arrive late and still describe reality correctly. But the order no longer stays intact. The packets are late, but not only late. The screen begins folding back across its own timeline. New arrivals point toward older activity. Completed events reopen. Closed transmission windows appear active again for a few seconds before disappearing back into the archive. The first timestamp stops looking isolated after that. It becomes the first visible sign that the signal is repeating the same behavior. And once mission control loses confidence in what moment the data belongs to, every new packet becomes harder to place inside a stable timeline. A reconstruction diagram spreads across the center monitor while the incoming packets pause for the first time in minutes. Thin lines reconnect fragmented telemetry windows. Missing sections slide back into place. The overlapping bursts begin forming a single delayed path instead of separate events. Messy packet fragments snap into a clean diagram. One engineer isolates the silence window and overlays a relay correction model on top of it. The alignment holds longer than expected. Stored signal fragments, delayed and released back into the system out of order, could explain the broken sequence without requiring new activity from the source itself. Triton's delayed signal looks explainable. The room changes immediately after that. Shoulders lower. Conversations restart quietly. Someone begins rebuilding the timeline from the corrected relay path, while the earlier contradictions fade into something procedural instead of impossible. For a moment, it works. At Triton's distance, even a clean transmission arrives through long-delayed windows anyway. Nobody expects instant communication from that far beyond Earth. A backlog explanation feels believable because delay already belongs to the system. And once the anomaly receives a relay explanation, people in the room stop treating it like an active event. The corrected packet chain stabilizes on screen. Earlier chaos begins looking less like active behavior and more like stored data arriving late. The first wrong timestamp no longer feels alive, just misplaced. The next packet queue waits underneath the reconstruction model. If delayed fragments caused the disorder, the remaining arrivals should now return in sequence. The prediction is simple. One normal response would stabilize the entire explanation. The monitors stay steady for another few seconds. Then the next packet arrives. The packet arrives clean enough that nobody notices the problem immediately. No fragmentation, no overlap. The reconstruction model accepts it instantly and drops the transmission into the corrected sequence without resistance. For a few seconds, the system finally looks stable. Then one operator stops moving. A response field inside the packet matches a command structure scheduled for the next outbound cycle. The highlighted section appears on the monitor beside the live command log. One side contains a completed response pattern. The other side is still blank. The command had not been sent. Nobody speaks for a moment after that. One engineer scrolls backward through the outbound queue again, slower this time, checking whether the field had been accidentally populated earlier during reconstruction. It had not. Triton's signal answers commands not yet sent. The earlier explanation collapses in a different direction than before. Delayed backlog data can arrive late. Stored fragments can re-enter the system out of sequence. But old information cannot reference instructions that do not exist yet inside the receiver timeline. The clean packet makes the contradiction harder to dismiss. A single timing error can be absorbed. This cannot. The verification chain depends on cause appearing before response. Without that order, mission control cannot tell whether it is observing Triton, delayed transmission behavior, or its own expectations feeding backward into the signal path. The blank command field remains open on the screen while the response packet continues scrolling underneath it. And suddenly, the clean reconstruction model from earlier stops looking reassuring at all. It looks like the thing that exposed the failure. The waveform stops changing. No more fragmentation. No more folding timelines. The signal settles into a smooth, repeating pattern across the monitor, while the receiver systems quietly accept packet after packet without resistance. Calm waveform beside impossible timestamps. One operator scrolls through the timing column again anyway. The transmission sequence remains impossible. Arrival markers continue referencing moments that do not fit the operational record underneath them. The reconstruction system accepts the data automatically now, but nobody in the room can explain why the order still fails. Triton's signal becomes clean, but unverifiable. For a while, the control room turns almost silent. A printer continues feeding timestamp logs onto the floor beside the consoles. Someone keeps checking the relay correction model, even though the model no longer restores confidence. The screens look stable. Trust does not. The signal returned. Certainty did not. At outer planet distance, nothing reaches Earth directly. Every observation arrives after crossing enormous delays. Receiver systems, storage paths, reconstruction layers, and human interpretation. The packets now look cleaner than they did earlier in the event, but the cleaner they become, the less anyone can prove about what actually happened first. The signal stabilizes. Confidence does not. The final pattern proves less than the broken one. The opening silence changes meaning because of that. It no longer looks empty. It looks unverified. And the deeper problem is no longer whatever happened near Triton. The deeper problem is how easily a processed system can make uncertainty appear calm, ordered, and real.